sure you've all seen the UFO hysteria. Every couple hours, it seems like a new UFO is being identified.
Hold up.
A U.S. F-22 once again shooting down an unidentified object in the sky today over Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeting, "I ordered the takedown of an unidentified object that violated Canadian airspace. NORAD command shot down the object over the Yukon.
XQC
Canadian and
over here,
U.S.
stroking
aircraft
his
were
dick.
scrambled
Shut
when
up.
the U.S. F-22 successfully fired at the object." Trudeau says he also spoke to President Biden, and Canadian forces will work to recover the wreckage. This as the U.S. military is in the process of recovering the wreckage of another unidentified object shot down Friday off the coast of Alaska. The White House saying this object was flying at 40,000 feet, posing a threat to civilian aircraft.
Out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of the Pentagon, President Biden...
Chat, but why do the aliens only go to the United States and Canada? Are they interested in the rest of the planet?
ordered the military to down the object, and they did.
One senior official describing it as cylindrical and silverish gray. The Pentagon saying it's about the size of a
I think they want to
small
meet me.
car.
Do you have anything to say about the object shot down over Alaska, Mr. President?
The White House says the object was first detected Thursday evening. Fighter jets sent to observe, determining it was unmanned. The president briefed Thursday, giving the order to shoot it down Friday morning. An F-22 fighter jet taking the shot at 1:45 p.m. This object didn't appear to have the gondola underneath it, like the suspected Chinese spy balloon that was shot down off the coast of the Carolinas.
There's no indication that it had any capability to be powered or to steer in a particular direction.
It's using some sort of fucking alien fuel. Dude, I'm calling ahead of time. Some aliens have like this weird like biomechanical hexafuel and it's unlimited. Oh, fuck off.
Or to collect intelligence.
President Biden has faced some criticism for not acting sooner to shoot down that Chinese spy balloon before it transversed the United States.
What if, chat? Gravity's pulling you down, but they have a gravity reverser. And they're flying because they're equalizing the gravity of the reversal and the real gravity. And they're just hovering and shit. True.
Sovereign territory. That
Think about it.
is encroached upon.
Think about it.
On Friday, the military announced they had found the massive technology bay from that Chinese spy balloon at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. M. Wynn, ABC News, Washington.
PogChamp, or was it really
blasted out of the sky. This is a phenomenon that's happening around the world, it seems, and it's leading people to believe that aliens are coming to visit us in droves, like they're all taking a school field trip to planet Earth.
Or they're already here, and they're trying to leave.
Then subsequently getting shot down, which I can't imagine would have been part of their itinerary. Now, this all started with the spy balloon that the U.S. shot down. Basically, this balloon the size of a few school buses was identified and then executed. It was this giant balloon that looked like the house.
Chat, what if the aliens have been here and they've been studying us, right? To see if we're gonna be the next prospect for like expansion, right? And they're just like, no. In recent times, they're like, no, these guys are dumb as fuck.
From up,
We're leaving.
But instead of a house, it was just a surveillance device, which they said came from China, and from what I've read, China did take ownership of it, but called it an overreaction to shoot it down, which gave me a bit of a giggle, because I just love that image of like, hey, whoa, guys.
I just want to see it.
A few hours ago, China said that it was preparing to shoot down an unidentified flying object.
They're still in China as well!
They're all over the place. It's a very interesting situation, and this is even more weird considering I just posted a video going over aliens and how I don't believe they've ever visited Earth, and now 2 days later, we've got UFOs out the wazoo here. Maybe the madman I was arguing with on Twitch was right about warp drives, and they're fucking firing on turbo mode with
Chat, this isn't a world war. This is world wars. World's war.
Their warp drive technology to visit us here. I'll go ahead and give my perspective now. I still am not convinced it's aliens, because if it was, we stand 0% chance of actually shooting them down. Our technology wouldn't even begin to make them, like, consider us a threat. We are so laughably low on the technological food chain of a species that can visit our planet, because they would have cracked things that are beyond our comprehension. There's no way they'd somehow fall victim to our weaponry. But zoinks Scoob, I'll tell ya, I couldn't be happier to be proven wrong. I would love if this truly was extraterrestrial tourists just coming by to visit.
The strongest
though
weapon
I'm sure they wouldn't be
is social media. All they can do is infiltrate the systems. They don't have to fire a gun. If it's just social media, plant some dog shit seed. Wait, what if this is it? Wait, what if this is it?
Happy about us destroying their, like, balloon travel devices. But god damn it, that would be amazing. I also love the idea that it actually is alien visitors, and the way that they get here is through, like, hot air balloon through space. Like, the most inefficient means of travel imaginable, but somehow that's the one that they've chosen. But regardless, I would love if it was aliens. I also love the discussion around aliens right now. You'll have people giving all kinds of, like, evidence, once again, of, like, abductions and shit. I fell asleep one day while working on a construction site, and when I woke up, there was ejaculate in my pants. And I didn't even remember having a wet dream. Fucking aliens abducted me and jerked me off in order to frame me to look like a weirdo at my job. You know, like, discussion around aliens has never been hotter than right now. And again, I would love if these UFOs really were alien, but I'm doubtful. And you know what? Maybe I can even make an argument for why aliens might want to visit Earth. Maybe they're coming here to buy Moist Global merch from moistglobal.com. It's so comfortable that words traveled across the galaxy. It's the best fucking merch ever designed, and they know it. So they have to come to Earth in order to get, like, proper connection to the server, so that way they can purchase it. And you can too. It's all available at moistglobal.com. Right now we're doing... Heaven have mercy on the elves. Yeah, that's what we have up right here. The Canada UFO thing. Someone said there was a video.
Chat, I want to put a bit of darker. Chat, I want to get better at the game. I want to play with the Bunkillium.
We cannot publicly go into many details about how we discover and counteract foreign intelligence collection efforts, because much of what we have done and are doing is, of course, sensitive. But we were able to determine that China has a high-altitude balloon program for intelligence collection that's connected to the People's Liberation Army. It was operating during the previous administration, but they did not detect it. We detected it. We tracked it. And we have been carefully studying it to learn as much as we can. We know that these PRC surveillance balloons have crossed over dozens of countries on multiple continents around the world, including some of our closest allies and partners. We assessed that at this time, these balloons have provided limited additive capabilities to the PRC's other intelligence platforms used over the United States.
Like TikTok?
But in the future, if the PRC continues to advance this technology, it certainly could become more valuable to them. The President also instructed the intelligence community to take a broad look at the phenomenon of unidentified aerial objects. Indeed, President Biden conducted the first ever daily intelligence briefing session devoted to this phenomenon back in June of 2021. He was briefed that this is not just an issue for the United States, but one for the rest of the world. And as I said, our friends and our partners are dealing with this as well. We worked on a bipartisan basis to stand up an office at the Pentagon to study this, in partnership with the intelligence community, academic institutions, and the private sector.
I see it then.
These unidentified aerial phenomena have been reported for many years without explanation or deep examination by the government. President Biden has changed all that. We are finally trying to understand them better. Now, in light of the Chinese balloon program and this recent incursion into our airspace, the United States and Canada, through NORAD, have been more closely scrutinizing
what about the UFOs,
airspace,
though?
Including enhancing our radar capabilities, which, as the commander of NORTHCOM and NORAD, General Van Herk, said just last night, may at least partially explain the increase in the objects that have been detected. Slow-moving objects at high altitude with a small radar cross-section are difficult to detect on radar. Even objects the size of the Chinese spy balloon, which had a payload the size of roughly 3 school buses, were not picked up by previous administrations or other countries.
Just look at it then.
We also know that a range of entities, including countries, companies, research, and academic organizations, operate objects at these altitudes for purposes that are not nefarious at all, including scientific research. That said, because we have not yet been able to definitively assess what these most recent objects are, we acted out of an abundance of caution to protect the security, our interest, and flight safety. In Saturday's case, we acted in consultation with the Canadian government, the President speaking personally with Prime Minister Trudeau. The spy balloon was, of course, different because we knew precisely where that was. As we have said, we do not assess that these most recent objects posed any direct threat to people on the ground, and we are laser focused on confirming their nature and purpose, including through intensive efforts to collect debris in the remote locations where they have fallen. In each instance, we have followed the same basic course.
Isn't that kind of war, though?
We assessed
like,
whether they posed any kinetic
airfields
threat
of
to
other
people
places?
on the ground. They did not. We assessed whether they were sending any communication signals. We detected none. We looked to see whether they were maneuvering or had any propulsion capabilities. We saw no signs of that. And we made sure to determine whether or not they were manned. They were not. We did, however, assess that their altitudes were considerably lower than the Chinese high-altitude balloon and did pose a threat to civilian commercial air traffic. And while we have no specific reason to suspect that they were conducting surveillance of any kind, we couldn't rule that out. That is why the President, at the recommendation of the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Northcom NORAD commander, gave the order to shoot them down. These missions were completed successfully and safely. Efforts are actively underway right now at all sites to find what is left of those objects so that we can better understand and communicate with the American people what they are. I think it's important to remind the objects in Alaska and Canada are in pretty remote terrain, ice and wilderness, all of that making it difficult to find them in winter weather. The object over Lake Huron now lies in what is probably very deep water. So outside of recovery operations, what are we doing? Well, first, we are continuing to monitor.
Sure.
There are no active tracks today, but the professionals at NORAD will continue to do their important work. Secondly, we are consulting with allies and partners on the challenge of identified aerial phenomenon and how we can all work together to deal with that challenge. The President has directed the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and the Director of National Intelligence to engage with their relevant counterparts to share information and to try to gain their perspectives as well.
Why do they keep sending balloons,
Again, this is an issue that affects everybody around the world.
I don't get it.
Third, we will continue to brief members of Congress and relevant state leadership on what we are doing and what we learn. The President has made this a very top priority. We have, over the course of just the last few days, and certainly over the course of last week, reached out to inform and brief members of Congress and relevant state governors of the operations that we were conducting and of the recovery operations that are underway. We've also kept Congress briefed generally on this issue of Chinese surveillance balloons, including classified briefings last August.
If they're testing, it's gonna.
Last week, administration officials provided classified briefings for all senators and all members of the House of Representatives on the PRC surveillance balloon.
What about the UFOs?
We fully expect and anticipate and support the ability to continue these briefings in the days ahead. And fourth, the President, through his National Security Advisor, has today directed an interagency team to study the broader policy implications for detection, analysis, and disposition of unidentified aerial objects that pose either safety
oh my God,
or security
those UFOs, a fucking squirrel.
Every element of the government
you
will redouble their efforts to understand and mitigate these events. And I'm happy to take some questions.
So my power lines is fucker.
John, if the objects don't pose a military threat and they don't pose a threat to anybody on the ground, why shoot them down? Particularly because the military is routinely monitoring radar blips.
What?
I kind of covered that in the opening statement. Two real reasons here. First, there was a very real potential risk to civilian air traffic. The one shot down on Saturday,
Bro, you don't know what they contain, what they have.
Was about 20,000 feet. And the two shot down Friday and Saturday were at about 40,000 feet. And as you know, transcontinental air traffic is roughly around 30,000 feet. It depends, of course, on weather. And so because we assessed that they weren't manned and weren't being controlled, therefore left to atmospheric conditions, the real risk to safety of flight was a problem. The second purpose, and I talked about this earlier too, was even though we had no indications that any of these three objects were surveilling, we couldn't rule that out. And so you want to err on the side of safety here in terms of protecting our national security interests, and the fact that these objects could have and and likely did at some point in their path transit over potential military sites of ours or sensitive sites. So again, out of an abundance of caution for those two reasons, the president, with the recommendation of his military leaders, directed them to be taken down.
Because it's so unprecedented, should the public be hearing from the president directly on this?
We have been, I think, as transparent as we can be. I won't speak for the president's personal speaking schedule, but I mean, he has been deeply engaged in every one of these decisions. He's been kept informed, including as of this morning, on what's going on with recovery efforts, and he's very much staying on top of the issue and directing his team to make sure we are properly consulting and briefing not just members of Congress, but state leaders as well. And of course, we're also doing what we can in the public sphere.
Can you get the European countries?
Wait a second, sir. Excuse me.
Jesus.
Thank you, John. What is the president's standard going to be going forward about when he orders an unidentified object shot down?
It comes down to one simple formulation, and that's if at the recommendation of his military leaders, he believes that the safety and security of the United States, that the safety and security of the American people, his prime responsibility, warrant that kind of a decision.
So it's possible we could see these shoot-downs on a regular basis like we saw.
Oh my God.
I don't think it's useful for me to get ahead of where we are right now. The president will always side on preserving and protecting the safety and security of the American people.
You said we're not flying any surveillance balloons over China. Are we flying any other kind of surveillance craft routinely over China?
We are not flying surveillance balloons over China. I'm not aware of any other craft that we're flying over into Chinese airspace.
And then finally, can you tell us anything more about this octagonal object? How big was it?
We're still trying to assess what that was. I'm not going to get into a description. I've seen the press reports about what it looked like. I think we all need to be humble here in terms of what our ability is to positively identify stuff from fighter aircraft that are going several hundred miles an hour past, essentially, in terms of relative motion, a stationary object that was not very big. So we don't know what this exactly looked like, and again, we're still not sure exactly what the purpose of it was or who owned it, but we hope to be able to find out more once we can recover the debris from that one and from the other two as well.
Just a few minutes ago, Prime Minister Trudeau said that there's some sort of pattern to the objects over the last few days. Is that something you can elaborate on, what sort of pattern the White House has seen?
I'm not familiar with the Prime Minister's comments, so I don't know if I should take a swing at that. I would just tell you that, going back to what I said before, these objects were not being maneuvered. They did not appear to have any self-propulsion. So the likely hypothesis is that they were being moved by the prevailing winds. And maybe perhaps that's what the Prime Minister's talking about. I don't want to speak for him, but certainly as the prevailing winds, particularly at that altitude, go west to east across the North American airspace, I mean, there was a general common movement in that regard.
You spoke at the top about kind of reassessing radar given what happened with the initial balloon. Can you give us a sense, can we expect, should we assume that this is the regular number of these objects over the United States, that they've always been there and they just haven't been looked at the same way? Or is there any reason to expect that this is more than usual that are flying over?
So two thoughts there. I mean, I think...
it's not a terrible question.
I think we can all get our heads around the fact that there are sometimes things floating at high altitudes for various purposes. As I said, scientific research, weather balloons, all manner of innocuous craft can be aloft at high altitudes. I don't think that that's necessarily unusual here. It's difficult for me to say exactly what you can expect going forward. One of the reasons that we think we're seeing more is because we're looking for more. As you heard General Van Herk mention last night, they have modified the filters and the gains, as we call it, of the radar capabilities to look more
visible
discreetly
from the ground
at high altitude,
that doesn't make
small
sense.
Radar cross section,
People have been looking in the sky for shit
and low
for
speed
decades.
objects. And so if you do that, Anybody that's operated a radar will know you can set the parameters, and if you set the parameters in such a way that to look for a certain something, it's more likely that you're going to find a certain something.
Given all you've discussed here and the actions the administration are taking and what people have learned, Chinese spy balloon this year and previous years, these unidentified objects that we shoot down, they might have a question. When it comes to these higher altitudes, are America's borders secure?
The president takes, as I said earlier, he takes our national security extremely seriously. He has no higher responsibility than the safety and security of the American people. And I don't think you need to look any further, quite frankly, than the decisions he's made in just the last week to 10 days to evidence that.
But it feels like he's plugging holes. Like these are vulnerabilities that we are discovering in real time.
You're making an assumption there that I don't know that the analysis will actually bear out.
Brian in the back.
Thank you very much. The president gave the order to shoot down the object over Lake Huron yesterday. Where was he? What kind of information did he have when he gave that order? What was briefed to him? And how did he anticipate the outcome of that?
He was here in the White House. He was kept constantly informed by his national security team and certainly by the military. He made that decision. I couldn't give you the exact time on the clock, but it was I believe mid to late morning, and then it was executed in the afternoon.
Were there contingencies in place in case there was a reaction from a foreign government in reaction to shooting that object down? Was the president anticipating the one yesterday? Yeah.
Well, it was shot over. I mean, it was shot over Lake Huron and landed in what we believe to be the Canadian side of the lake. So we were obviously in constant communication and consultation with our Canadian counterparts, and they are, rightly because of where we think it splashed down. I mean, they're sort of in concert with the U.S. Coast Guard, but they are also involved in trying to locate the
so
debris
who's the alien?
There was good communication
Canada
with our
or US?
Canadian allies.
Signs of a foreign government taking a special interest in that object from yesterday?
No.
Or reacting in an unusual way?
No.
Good. SV in the back.
Thanks. John, two questions. One, you mentioned early on that the China balloon might have been giving limited additive capabilities. I assume you're meaning onto their satellite surveillance. Can you specify what exactly it's getting from a balloon that they're not getting from orbiting satellites?
Fair enough. That's a good question. I like
the
that.
caveat that we haven't fully recovered everything, though we have recovered some things from the bottom of the
That's a good question.
Of the Atlantic, and we're analyzing that. But with that caveat that we don't know exactly what this balloon was surveilling or what its capabilities were. So just in general, and that is an important caveat that I'd like you to remember. When you are at a lower altitude than space, you could perhaps get a better fidelity of imagery, for instance, of things on the ground.
Yeah, but
when you are not moving at the speed of a satellite, and therefore, only getting seconds over a site, when you can maneuver left, right, slow down, speed up, like this thing could, then you can loiter. If you can loiter, you can soak in a little bit more. You can spend more time over a sensitive site.
Some of their satellites are in geostationary orbit. I mean, they're just sitting there gathering signals intelligence, right? So what is the benefit? I mean, is it just to see what kind of fidelity?
We're going to learn more. I'd rather not go into any more detail than that right now. We're going to learn more.
Well, also,
and frankly, I think that's a terrific question.
We're going to respond to they get from sitting at high school Project Balloon.
You said that the other objects shot down were not able to transmit, or were not transmitting signals, that they did not have any propulsion. Did the China balloon, did that have any, was it emitting signals back?
I'm not going to go into more detail about the capabilities of that. We are going to be studying it and analyzing it. There is no question in our minds that system was designed to surveil, that was an intelligence asset. I'll leave it there.
So they don't know what it does, but they know it surveils.
Outreach from anywhere in the administration to the kinds of companies that produce weather balloons or other craft that would fit these descriptions that might be from the commercial or corporate world to say, is this yours, or any kind of outreach, or have you been hearing from anyone who might say, we have ours, they're in this area. Is any of that going on now?
I don't know of any conversations right now, Kelly, but one of the reasons why the president directed Mr. Sullivan to put together an interagency effort is to take a long look at that and try to learn a little bit better about who is up at that altitude doing what for completely legitimate purposes. I think we all recognize we need to probably have a better set picture on that, and that's why the president wants this interagency effort to take a look.
And what kind of intelligence might be happening in terms of the diplomacy that's going on or whatever, if these are state-owned objects?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Is there a network of conversations that might be happening where someone might be able to say, based on this octagonal description, that, hey, that sounds like the so-and-so? I mean, is there some conversations that are happening that might be able to give us some descriptions?
I mean, the short answer to your question is yes, and I talked about that in my opening statement. The president also directed Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, Director Haynes, to have these kinds of conversations with our allies and partners around the world, to share with them what we're learning, but also to get their perspectives.
They have all the data, right questions.
For commercial purposes.
Yeah, again, we're going to have those kinds of conversations with our allies and partners to see what kind of experiences they have had, what we can learn from them, what perhaps they can learn from us.
And are we still with object, or can we call them balloons?
Still with object.
And just to follow up on Kelly's question,
and I won't mess that up today.
On the corporate angle, is there any expectation that this is going to affect the executive order on surveilling the U.S. companies and what they're doing in China and their
I know of no
operations
such
there?
change to that executive order.
Okay, and then is there, and you said a moment ago that there's no knowledge of a U.S. balloon or other craft over Chinese territory, just being cognizant of the fact that China has a different definition of what their territory is than the United States. Is there any U.S. surveillance aircraft over Taiwan, over the South China Sea that would fit into that?
There is no U.S. surveillance aircraft over Chinese in Chinese airspace.
Okay, even Chinese claimed airspace.
There is no U.S. surveillance aircraft in.
Well, how's that count? I mean, they would shoot it down as well.
And then just finally, is there any new formal approach that's being developed as far as how you're going to deal with these things on a systematic basis going forward? Is there?
Well, again, that's exactly what the president wants Mr. Sullivan to run as a process, an interagency process, to help us, as I said in my opening statement, get around the policy implications here, and whether or not there needs to be any policy changes going forward.
I have a bunch of questions I could ask on the fly. Way better than these guys.
Taking down objects over U.S. territory, as far as I'm aware of.
What is he wearing?
My question is, you talked about the tweak in the radar systems.
Yeah.
Has there been a tweak in the threshold for the Pentagon presenting to the president signing off on military action related to anything over our airspace?
I'm not sure I'm following what you mean.
In the wake of the Chinese spy balloon, the radars were tweaked, which is why you think you're seeing some of these
these kids.
Has the decision about, or has the threshold for the use of fighters to take down objects also been tweaked? Has it been lowered? Has it been changed? We've never seen this before. All of a sudden we've seen three
actually, I'm sorry I didn't understand it at first. No, I mean, and you heard General Van Herk talk about this last night. He's using established protocols to engage craft in the air, aircraft in the air, that can be legitimately brought down. And as he said last night, the best way to do that, certainly in a timely and efficient, effective way, was through fighter aircraft and through the Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. And they looked at, and he talked about this, they looked at other options to try to bring them down, to include gunfire, but that would have presented a greater risk to the pilots themselves. So this was the safest, most effective way to do that. Now, where we go from here, I think we just don't know right now in terms of whether there needs to be threshold changes, as you put out. I think it's important to just take a step back here and remember what the president did was order these actions with the safety and security of the American people foremost in his mind.
Take that shit down, pal.
There were very good reasons to do it. The military then, once given an order, determines how they're going to execute that order. General Van Herk decided that the best way to do this was with Sidewinder missiles and fighter aircraft.
And just to quickly put a sharper point on it, this isn't reactive to the Chinese spy balloon in the sense of there was political pressure, and so we are going to act quickly to take down any objects over our airspace because of the pressure that came from, say, Republic.
These were decisions based purely and simply on what was in the best interest of the American people.
I mean, that makes sense.
John, does the U.S. government have video or imagery of these latest intercepts, and will you guys be releasing it?
You'd have to talk to DOD about that, Jackie. I don't know what kind of imagery might exist, and they'd be one to talk about whether they're releasable or not. Obviously,
Jackie, come on.
Certainly, with respect to the spy balloon, we want to make sure that we are gleaning what we can from this imagery, so that we can answer your questions better. And so, to what degree there is or will or will not be public release, I do want to stress that we're going to want to make sure that we have had a chance to analyze that imagery for ourselves as much as possible.
Following up on Phil's question,
He knows all the girls' names, but none of the guys' names.
Discern, as you said earlier, we're looking for these more, so we're finding more. And
I said that could be one reason why we're finding more.
One reason, but what we're getting at is, why are we all of a sudden shooting them down? And to add to that, the NORAD commander, for instance, said that when the first spy balloon was crossing over American and Canadian airspace, one of the reasons that he couldn't take action was because his assessment was that it didn't pose a military threat or have hostile intent, and so he couldn't take action there. It seems like maybe that protocol has changed, or his ability to make that call where there is not an imminent threat militarily or physically might have changed. So can you explain to us what changed? Why are we shooting them down all of a sudden?
Yo, blow that shit up.
I kind of feel like I took care of that in my opening statement, but I'm happy to revisit it. I mean, really two reasons here. And these are certainly in both cases, they're different. I mean, I think we need to separate the Chinese spy balloon. We knew what it was. We knew where it was going. We knew what it was trying to do. And by not taking it down, I mean, that was also a huge payload. Like I said, the size of 3 school buses. So really the option of shooting that down over land wasn't a legitimate option, because somebody really could have gotten hurt. And we used the time available to us, knowing what this thing was all about. We used that time to study it, to learn from it, to collect on it. Then taking it down at the earliest opportunity in the water. And we have retrieved some of that debris off the bottom, and we're studying that. Hang on a second, I'll be right there. So let's separate that from these other 3. And these other 3, what are some of the differences? Altitude's a big difference.
Is that the threshold now? A risk to civilian aircraft?
Let me get through this, and then
Jackie,
altitude's different.
Jesus.
The Chinese spy balloon was
Jackie.
at 60,000 plus, well outside commercial air traffic concerns. These 3 were right on the border of it, so there was a legitimate concern there. Chinese spy balloon, we knew exactly what that thing was, and we knew what it was trying to do, and we saw it, Jackie, as it slowed down, sped up, maneuvered a little bit, trying to get a look at what we believed to be sensitive military sites. These other 3, they didn't have propulsion, they weren't being maneuvered. It was basically they were being driven by the wind. We don't know for sure whether they had a surveillance aspect to them, but we can't rule it out. So there was enough uncertainty there that, again, out of an abundance of caution, doing the prudent thing, the president directed that they get taken down. And I get where you're going. Is this the standard going forward? And we're gonna dive into this. We're gonna learn from these 3 events. We're gonna continue to study what happened. We're gonna have an interagency effort that helps us get around the policy implications here, and we'll see where this goes. But bottom line for President Biden is, you got to do the right thing for the American people, for our safety and security.
I can't afford that shit.
No one's claimed these yet as theirs?
I can't say whether that's strange or not, since we're sort of in uncharted territory here, no pun intended. But we don't know, and I suspect that. Hey. Go ahead. I'm basically done. I'm basically done.
Sir, what's your name, sir?
Oh, from CBS.
Okay.
Has the payload been recovered from South Carolina yet?
The
large so-called payload that's...
Yeah, as I said, some of the debris, certainly they were able to take things off the surface like the next day, actually that afternoon, some of the balloon fabric. And in the days since, They have been able to.
John Kirby there, the national security spokesperson in the House, who did say that there was no question in their minds that the balloon they shot down over South Carolina a week ago was a surveillance asset, and that they know that China has a high-altitude balloon program for intelligence purposes.
Yeah, I'm listening too, man! No shit! I'm listening!
Additional intelligence as it relates to the 3 other balloons that have been shot down over the last few days. They said that might have arisen simply because of the closer scrutiny the US was putting towards these types of objects, and framed it more as
I'd be a very wealthy man. I mean, it could take a long time, given the sea state and weather conditions and the degree to which we have to protect the safety of the divers.
And one last question. You said you were unsure of the surveillance capabilities of these latest objects. Last week we were told several times that every precaution was taken to ensure that the sensitive installations were covered. We don't know exactly what you all did, but has there been a
Nor are you going to find out.
Well, has there been a posture change nationwide regarding all of these sensitive sites?
If you're
proactively,
if you're let me just put a fork in this. If the implication is that there's some sort of blanket now security policy for every base on the continental United States, the answer is no. We do have protocols, particularly when we know that surveillance is going to occur, like in the Open Skies Treaty with Russia, for instance, when all that's scheduled and laid out, and when you know that there's going to be an open skies flight by Russia, you take the appropriate action.
In sign language,
and that's what we did in the case of the Chinese spy balloon. And we'll always do that. I will never talk about what precautions we're going to make at any given base at any given time, but we always do what we need to do to protect our nation's secrets.
Bro, dude,
I won't talk about it anymore.
Like, what the fuck?
Way in the back.
I'm asking questions, man. I meant non-verbal, like,
talking about
facial expressions. I've mentioned it before.
The report from ODNI recently that goes over this. In that ODNI report about unidentified aerial phenomena, it says there were 247 unidentified aerial phenomenon reports since March of 2021, some of which have, quote, demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. So can you say why the president just recently, within the last couple of weeks, started ordering some of these objects to be shot down, and why there weren't any orders throughout 2021 or throughout 2022?
It's very simple. It comes down to what sort of safety and security threats and risks we're talking about, and also it comes down to a lot to our ability to track, detect, and engage. Having come from the Pentagon, I can tell you that some of these UAPs, while we may not be able to know what each and every one is doing, some of the big concern there was that many of those reports were happening around our training ranges, were happening around air training ranges. So combat pilots were seeing these things, and there was a potential impact to the safety of flight of our pilots. But you may not have but a fleeting moment on some of these things to see it, and so it's different in these cases. We had
I know that mom and dad is by like
detect,
doing something with the hand like that and touching the head,
time
something
to
like
make
that.
those kinds of
I know if
decisions.
you're not
But it
feeling
all
good,
comes down
it's like
to
I think it's
safety and security
this,
first and foremost.
This like that.
The time though is a matter of capability. We have better capabilities now
and then
than we did.
We are certainly improving our capabilities now, and as I said, the president has directed the National Security Team to dig into this deeper from an interagency effort and to see what if other improvements might need to make. I mean, look, just by adapting the way the radar parameters are set, we have improved our ability to detect. And again, I said that could be one reason why we're seeing more.
Thank you so much. So you said that the debris fell on frozen waters or in remote areas, and these are also not huge objects, and they were shot down by missiles. So how optimistic are you that you will be able to collect enough debris to really get an idea of what these objects were?
We won't know until we get on site to see. You know, how much damage was done, not just by the missile strike, but by the fall from a very high altitude, and as you said, in one case on sea ice. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, thank you, John. Does Secretary of State Blinken plan to meet with his Chinese counterpart this week at the Munich Security Conference?
I'd refer you to the State Department for the Secretary's schedule. I don't have visibility on it.
And have you been able to? What have you been able to learn more, or not you, but the government, since these objects were shot down? I mean, you just alluded to the fact that that you've not been able to.
I enjoy watching it though. I enjoy watching it. That was kind of cool though. I enjoy watching the news somehow.